The old attic of the country house held more than just dust and objects, forgotten by time. It was a cloudy afternoon, with the wind blowing through the wooden windows and the creaking of the floorboards accompanying every step of Alina, a young historian visiting the property inherited from her grandmother. Its objective was clear: to organize documents, catalog memories, give a destination to the past. What she didn't know was that day, she would find something that would change her view of love, sacrifice, and the eternity of feelings. Among boxes of old photos, faded military uniforms, and yellowed notebooks, Alina saw a dark wooden chest with rusty hardware and a padlock that was no longer functional. When she opened it, the smell of time invaded her nostrils. Books with dedications, war medals, a hand-embroidered lace scarf, but something especially caught his eye: an envelope, wrapped in a faded blue ribbon, with the firm, masculine handwriting still visible despite the decades. She held the envelope carefully, almost as if it were too fragile to withstand modern touch. On the front, just a name: to Anna, with all the love a heart can bear. There was no date, sender, or address, just that name, Anna, Elena's grandmother's name. The young woman's heart beat faster. She sat down on the wooden floor and stood there, with the letter in her hands, as if time itself had stopped to witness that moment. I hadn't opened it yet. She was filled with a mixture of awe, curiosity, and fear. Who was the author of the letter? Why was it never read? And why was it hidden in a trunk, like a buried secret? As he gazed at the envelope, his mind began to connect loose dots. He knew that his grandmother, Anna, had lived during wartime as a youth. She had always been discreet about the past, rarely talked about feelings, about old loves. She was a strong woman, but there was always a shadow of longing in her eyes, something that Alina, until then, had never fully understood. He decided not to open the letter right away. I needed to understand the context. So she spent the next few days immersed in photo albums, letters exchanged with relatives, old family records. He gradually discovered the name of a soldier, Victor. The name appeared in an old diary of Anna's, written with affection, surrounded by poetry and drawings. A name that had been erased from family history, perhaps out of pain, perhaps out of the impossibility of moving forward without falling apart. Alina then decided to open the letter. He chose a silent morning, with the sound of birds and the country breeze as his soundtrack. She sat in the shade of a tree in the garden, the same one where her grandmother used to sew and read, and delicately broke the blue ribbon. When he opened the envelope, he found an aged but preserved sheet of paper. The words contained there seemed to pulse with emotion. It started with, "If this letter reached you, my love, it is because fate decided that I would not return. I write with trembling hands, but with a heart full of the love that has always been yours alone." The tears started flowing before she even finished the first paragraph. The letter was long, full of memories, confessions, goodbyes, a testament to a love interrupted by war, but which never died. Victor didn't just write to say goodbye, he wrote to let Anna know that she was, until the end, the reason for his hope in the midst of destruction. Alina read the entire letter with teary eyes. Each sentence was poetry, every word a sigh. It was as if Victor's own spirit was there, speaking across the lines, across decades, refusing to be forgotten. When he finished, he closed his eyes and hugged the letter to his chest. For the first time, he understood what his grandmother had lost. He understood the absence of broad smiles, the longing in the eyes, the silence when faced with questions about the past. At that moment, I knew I needed to tell this story. That letter could no longer remain a secret. It was the record of a true love, a love that survived war, death, and time. And although it never came to fruition, it was eternal, because it was sincere, pure, and immortalized in words. From then on, Alina decided to do justice to the memory of Victor and Anna. The letter would be read, shared. It would be transformed into a tribute to those who loved, lost, but never forgot. It was the beginning of a journey. The last letter would finally be heard. Before the war, before bombs ripped through the sky and railways took young people to distant battlefronts, there were only two young hearts beating in time. Viktor Petrov was 22 years old and had a curious outlook on the world. The son of a tailor, he grew up in a quiet village, surrounded by green fields and gently misty mornings. His destiny seemed simple: follow in his father's footsteps, learn the trade, perhaps open a store in the neighboring city. But everything changed when he met Anna Morozova. She was the daughter of a teacher, possessed of a serene intelligence and a discreet but deeply captivating beauty. She had brown hair that danced in the wind like autumn leaves, and a smile that Victor said could silence even thunder. They met one spring morning in front of the town's small library. Anna had dropped a book, and Victor picked it up. When their eyes met, something inside them changed forever. In the following months, they became inseparable. They walked along forest trails, read poetry by the river, exchanged letters even though they lived just a few blocks away. It was the kind of love that didn't need grandiose declarations. Shared silence, long looks, and clasped hands were enough. The war was still just a distant whisper in the newspapers, something happening in lands that seemed as far away as another planet. But little by little, rumors became orders, and young people began to disappear from the streets of the village, drafted into the army. The day came for Victor too. The enlistment letter came with the weight of 1,000 fates. When he read it, the first thing he did was run to Anna's house. She was waiting for him in the garden, as if she had felt it. "It will be quick," said Victor, trying to smile. "A few weeks of training, and I might not even be sent away. They say it will be resolved soon." But his eyes betrayed him. Anna saw the fear hidden there, saw the boy trying to be a man before his time. He approached, held his hands, and simply said, "I'll wait." That simple promise became an invisible bond between the two. In the following days, every moment gained sacred value. The last walk, the last meal, the last kiss. They knew that time was cruel, that parting was certain, but they could not allow themselves to fall into despair. On the eve of departure, Victor wrote his first letter to Anna, even though he was still by her side. He left the letter on his bed, with a dried flower inside. "If tomorrow I can't say what I feel, may these words do it for me. You are my peace in the midst of the chaos that comes. Even if my eyes no longer see this sky, my heart will always be your home." The next day, the train station was filled with crying mothers, children hugging their father's legs, and young men trying to look strong as they said goodbye. Victor and Anna looked at each other for long minutes before the final whistle. He didn't promise he would come back, just said, "You are in every part of me." She smiled through her tears, "And you, in every beat of my heart." The train left. At that moment, Victor was no longer just a young man from the village. He became a soldier, a man thrown into the unknown, taking with him the only piece of home he could carry, Anna's love. As the train disappeared over the horizon, Anna stood there, motionless, as if she could still see it waving. The silence that followed was absolute. She knew, deep in her soul, that that love would face the cruelest of trials. But I also knew it was true, and that was enough. On the training grounds, under the biting cold and harsh orders, Victor thought of her every dawn. Amid the noise of the gunshots, he remembered the sound of his laugh. When fear tried to overwhelm him, he would close his eyes and relive the feeling of your hand in his. It was Anna who held him steady. It was their love that made him resist. The world changed. Maps were redrawn with blood and fire, but there was something that could not be destroyed. That which was born pure and sincere, on spring mornings, between books and shared silences. It was the first love, and Victor knew it would also be the last. The sun was already beginning to hide behind the hills when Victor and Anna took their last walk before departure. The sky, dyed in shades of orange and violet, seemed to reflect the mixture of beauty and melancholy that surrounded the two. They walked side by side through the field where they had met so many times, where they laughed, dreamed, planned a future that now seemed threatened by the uncertainty of war. There was nothing more they could do to stop the match. The summons was final. Victor was to report to the barracks at dawn. But on that last night, they tried, in some way, to freeze time. As if they could immortalize that moment in small gestures, the intertwining of fingers, the touch of shoulder to shoulder, the silence that said more than 1,000 words. They sat on the edge of the stream where they had shared their first kiss, and there, in the soft light of the afternoon, the promises began to emerge, not as impulsive vows, but as deep vows, full of truth and hope. "When you come back," Anna said, in a low voice, "I want you to take me away from here. I want to start all over again, just the two of us." Victor looked at her, and even with his heart squeezed by the pain of separation, he felt invincible, as if that promise was an anchor in the midst of the approaching storm. "I'll come back to you," he said, "no matter how far I go." No matter how dark it gets, my soul will always look for you." She smiled, but her eyes were teary. They knew they were promising themselves something that they might not be able to fulfill. But at that moment, it was necessary. It was all they had. Victor took out of his pocket a small chain with a silver pendant, a tiny, ancient star that had belonged to his mother. He put it around Anna's neck and said, "This is so you never forget. As long as you breathe, there is someone, somewhere, fighting to come home." To you, Anna, with trembling hands, took from her basket a handkerchief embroidered with his initials. She had spent the previous night embroidering by candlelight, with tired fingers but a whole heart. He handed the scarf to Victor as if it were a piece of his own heart. "And this," she said, "is for when the world makes you forget who you are. It's to remember that here, in this forgotten village, someone knows you better than anyone else and loves everything you are." They hugged each other for a long time, as if trying to merge their souls into one. There was no time for long goodbyes. They knew that the train wouldn't wait, that the world wouldn't stop because of them. But there, in the middle of that silent field, time seemed to respect his pain. "Write," she asked, with her face against his chest. "Every day, if you can. Write to me, even if I can't answer. Your words will keep me alive. I promise," he whispered. "Each letter will be a part of me returning home." They walked back to the village with slow steps, holding on as if the touch was a shield against what was to come. At the door of Anna's house, Victor stopped. "I knew this was the point of no return. Any words now would seem small compared to the grandeur of the moment." "Anna," he began, but was unable to continue. She placed her finger on her lips and said, "Don't say goodbye. Say, see you soon. I will be here. Always." He nodded, and then, for the last time, he kissed her. It wasn't a hasty kiss, nor a desperate one. It was a calm kiss, full of tenderness and faith. A kiss that said, "Even if the world ends, my love will not end." That night, Victor didn't sleep. He wrote his first letter to Anna right there, sitting at the table in the guest house where he would spend his last hours on familiar soil. The candle flickered, and the paper absorbed his words like a shrine. He wrote as if he were talking to her, as if he were touching her face, as if that piece of paper was his last link to life before the unknown. "My dear Anna, as you write these lines, you are sleeping, perhaps with my scent still on your skin, and I want you to know that my entire heart is with you. Every step I take is for you. If war tries to change me, I will fight it with the memory of your laughter. I promised I would come back, and I will be back. But if for some reason that doesn't happen, know that I was yours until the end." The next morning, as the train departed, Victor looked out the window and, in the distance, saw Anna's silhouette standing on the same hill where they used to watch the sunset. She raised her hand, a simple gesture, but for him, it was like an eternal pact. And so, with a heart full of promises and a pocket full of letters he hadn't yet written, Victor went to war. I didn't know what I would find. He only knew who he was fighting for. The war, in the newspapers, had a heroic air. In the mouths of the officers, it sounded like a noble duty. But when Victor arrived at the front, the romanticism evaporated in the first shot. The battlefield was a nameless, colorless, merciless place. There was no music, no flags flying proudly, just the smell of mud, gunpowder, blood. It was a world made of icy trenches, screams in the dark, and silences more terrifying than any bombing raid. War was a machine, and Victor was now part of its gears. In the first few days, he still carried the vivid memory of Anna in his eyes. Every word she said seemed tattooed on her skin. But he soon discovered that there was no room for sweet memories there. There was only the present, immediate and brutal, and the gift was to survive. The training he had received seemed insufficient, given the chaos that surrounded him. The veterans had empty eyes, calloused hands, and spoke little. They taught with gestures, as if the words were buried in shallow graves, next to the friends they lost. Victor learned quickly how to assemble the weapon in the dark, how to run between explosions, how to sleep with one eye open, how not to go crazy when the face next to it was disfigured without warning. Even so, between one mission and another, I found time to write. He wrote on the back of torn maps, on pieces of packaging, on sheets stolen from the administration. Every word was an attempt to remember who he was before the war. Each letter was a cry for help disguised as tenderness. My Anna, today it rained all day. The mud covered our boots up to our knees. One of the guys in my platoon found a flower among the rubble. He put it on his helmet. Everyone laughed. It was one of those little miracles that make everything hurt a little less. When I look at the flower, I think of you. I think about our garden. I think about the smell of your skin when the world still made sense. These letters, he knew, might never arrive. There was censorship, there were losses, there were soldiers who kept them in their pockets and were later buried with them. Still he wrote, because writing was resisting. The nights were long. Sleep was a luxury, and when he did get it, he was tormented by broken dreams, flashes of home, Anna's distorted voice, the train returning to the village, and then, fire, always fire. He started losing friends. Some died in silence, others shouting their mother's names. Victor tried not to get attached, but it was impossible. There was something deeply human about sharing food, cigarettes, and fear with another man. With each loss, a part of you also died. The most difficult thing, however, was the lack of response. No letter from Anna, no news. He imagined 1,000 reasons. Maybe the letters were being blocked. Maybe she couldn't write. Maybe something had happened to her. Or, the worst of the thoughts, maybe she had given up hoping. In between battles, Victor found himself looking up at the sky. I was looking for some sign, any reminder of a time where anything was possible. But the sky of war has no stars. It is opaque, heavy, hopeless. Still, Victor resisted. Food was scarce. Uniforms did not protect against the biting cold. But he followed, and in every step, in every gesture, in every bullet he loaded in his rifle, there was the weight of Anna's name. It was for her that he clenched his teeth. It was because of her that he didn't go crazy. One day, in a rare moment of rest, he received an order. It was a small, dirty package with burnt edges. Inside, a scarf. The scarf he had given Anna, and a letter, but it wasn't hers. It was Anna's mother's. The letter said that the village had been evacuated after a bombing, that many houses were destroyed, that Anna was missing, that maybe she was alive, maybe injured, maybe dead. The letter slipped from Victor's hands. He sat down in the mud and remained there, motionless, for hours. No one dared speak to him. It was as if time had frozen just so he could feel every stab of the news, but deep down, something inside him didn't believe it. He knew Anna. I knew the strength she carried, the silent faith that guided her. She was alive. It had to be. Then he wrote once more, even without knowing where she was, even without knowing if the letter would arrive. He wrote, with dirty hands and a face marked by the soot of war, "Anna, don't ask me to believe that you are no longer in this world. I still feel your presence. I feel your breath in the cold morning. Wind, you are the memory that keeps me going. Don't die. Don't disappear. I'm still coming back to you." The war was still far from over, but Victor, even broken, still had one goal: to survive and somehow find your way back to her. The reality of the front did not allow for illusions, but the love he carried inside was stronger than any grenade, more stubborn than death, more eternal than war. Before continuing with the story, answer me honestly. Could you keep hope alive without any answers? Without knowing if the person you love is still on the other side? Because that's exactly what Victor is about to face. If you've made it this far, it's because this story touched you in some way. And if it did, don't let this moment go unnoticed. Click like now. This shows YouTube that this content deserves to be seen by more people. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, press the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Here, you are part of a community that values stories that touch the heart, soul, and memory. And it doesn't go away from there, because in the next chapter, silence begins to speak louder than any letter. The pain of absence, the fear of abandonment, and the weight of fighting alone. All of this awaits you in Topic 5, Silence in Responses. Take it from me, you don't want to miss what's coming now. The days at the front seemed to repeat themselves in a cruel cycle. One woke up to the sound of bombs, ate something cold and tasteless when there was something to eat, and then marched, fought, and buried the dead. But for Victor, there was something even more unbearable than the sound of gunfire or the sight of bodies scattered across the field. Silence. It was the silence of answers that never came. Since receiving the news that Anna was missing, Victor has started writing even more. I sent letters almost every week, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time, even though I wasn't sure if they would get anywhere. It was like throwing bottles. into the sea, hoping that one of them would reach a safe haven where Anna was still alive. But nothing came back. No response. No signal. At first he tried to justify it. The war was affecting everything, including the mail. Maybe Anna was in a refugee camp without access to paper. Maybe she was sick, but alive. Maybe he was looking for him too. But as the months dragged on, the justifications turned to anguish. The silence grew like a wall between him and his hope. Anna, today is the 5th letter I have written to you this month. I don't know where else to send it. I write anyway, because it's what keeps me breathing. I try to remember your voice, the way you held your hair when you read, the sound of your steps on the porch. But the memory, Anna, the memory is getting weak. Talk to me, even if it's in a dream, even if it's just one word. The words that once flowed from Victor's heart began to turn into pleas. He still wrote delicately, but each new line carried the weight of a man on the verge of emotional collapse. War didn't just take lives, it erased stories, stole answers, eroded hopes little by little. Like rust, Victor's companions saw his transformation. From a young man who wrote with shining eyes, he became a more introspective soldier who kept his letters like relics. During the nights when there was no attack, while the others slept, Victor would stay by the light of the lamp, rereading the few memories he still had of her. The scarf, the chain, the first letter, everything was still with him, but no response. One of his companions, Pavel, once asked, "Do you still believe she is alive?" Victor took a while to respond. He looked at the flame of the lamp, as if searching for an invisible truth. There. I don't know if I believe it anymore, but I need to. Because if I stop believing, there's nothing left. And it was true. Anna's absence was like an open wound. The silence was torture. But the faith that she still existed, somewhere, perhaps, thinking of him, was all that kept him standing. So he kept writing, "My beloved, tonight I dreamed of you. We were in the garden, picking apples. You laughed, and the world seemed whole again. But when I went to hug you, you disappeared. I woke up with tears on my face. Are you still there, on the other side of this silence? Do my words reach you in some way? Or am I writing to the wind?" Silence, Victor realized, was the hardest battlefield, because against bombs, he could run. Against gunfire, he could hide. But against the void, there was no trench. It was a lonely war, fought inside the chest, where the enemy was oblivion. Still, Victor refused to give up, because, amid the chaos of war, his love for Anna was the only thing that still connected him to what had once been human. It was his lighthouse, your north. Her absence, paradoxically, was what prevented him from losing himself for good. He began collecting scraps from the world around him to send to her, even though he didn't know if she would see it. A petal found in the field, a piece of fabric the color of her dress, an old button, a shiny stone that resembled her eyes. They were fragments of a life that he tried to reconstruct with gestures. "Anna, you taught me that love is more than presence, it's choice. And I choose, every day, to continue loving you, even without knowing where you are, even without hearing your voice. My heart insists on looking for you, in every corner of this destroyed land, in every unknown face, in every interrupted dream. I still wait for you." And so, as the world around him disintegrated into rubble, Victor kept alive what he could, his faith, his memory, and the love that resisted silence. Because sometimes the most powerful cry is the one that comes from the heart of someone who refuses to forget. The sky was heavy that morning, as if nature itself sensed what was coming. Victor woke up before sunrise, without knowing exactly why. It was one of those days when silence came before the storm, an almost respectful silence, as if even the war stopped for a moment to breathe. The commander appeared in the barracks with a closed face. He reported that Victor and 7 other men had been assigned to an infiltration mission. The objective: cross a mine zone, approach the enemy trenches, and destroy a communication base. The kind of operation that rarely ended with everyone coming back alive. While the other soldiers prepared themselves in silence, Victor just stood there, feeling the weight of that moment like never before. Something inside him said this mission would be different, definitive end. He took out the last letter he had written to Anna from his inside pocket. There was no envelope, just a sheet of paper folded carefully, like a reliquary. He reread it one last time, like someone saying goodbye to their own soul. Then he wrote a new one, not an ordinary letter, but a confession, a testament, a goodbye. "My Anna, If this letter reaches you, perhaps I will have already become part of the earth I walk on today. I don't want you to cry for me, nor do I want you to feel guilty. I want you to know that I loved you until the last second, and it was for that love that I fought. The war may have taken everything from me, but it never took you from inside me. If there is anything after this, if there is a place where broken hearts are reunited, that is where I will be waiting for you." He folded the letter carefully, tied it with a piece of string, and handed it to Pavel, his closest friend, with clear instructions. "If I don't come back, find a way to get this letter to her, even if it takes years, even if you have to cross the world." Pavel, with red eyes, nodded silently. I knew that request was sacred. The mission began before the sun fully rose. The men crawled between craters and barbed wire, each step calculated, each breath held back. Victor felt his heart beating so loudly that it seemed to echo across the field. But inside, there was a strange kamaz, if his soul already knew the outcome. They managed to advance to the impact zone, planted the explosives, but were spotted as they retreated. Shots rang out. One of the companions fell, another shouted, and then everything turned into chaos. Victor ran through the shots, seeking shelter, until he saw Pavel being hit and falling, injured, trying to protect the letter with his own body. Victor didn't hesitate. He went back to him, pulled him hard, carrying him to a nearby crater. "The letter," muttered Pavel, coughing up blood. "Don't lose it." "I won't," said Victor, holding tight to the small relic tied with string. But it soon became clear that there would be no way out. They were surrounded. The chances of returning were slim. It was then that Victor made his final choice. He handed the letter to Pavel, looked his friend in the eyes and said, "Survive, for me, for her." And he ran, attracting enemy fire, creating a distraction that allowed the others to flee. No one knows exactly what happened next. Some say Victor was hit while trying to climb a hill. Others believe he simply disappeared into smoke, like a ghost. What is known is that he never returned. Pavel, seriously wounded, managed to return to the Allied lines. He spent months in recovery, and during that time, he kept the letter like a treasure. He tried to send her. He tried to find Anna, but the world was torn apart. Roads were closed, records lost. The letter ended up forgotten inside a trunk that he gave to Victor's family, swearing that one day someone would find it. And she waited, decades, to be exact. She waited for hands to untie her, for eyes that read it, for a heart that understood her. Victor's last mission went far beyond the battlefield. His true goal was never just to destroy an enemy outpost. It was to protect the only beautiful thing left in his life, the love he felt for Anna. And although he never returned, his last gesture was an act of total surrender, a sacrifice for love. Because, in times of war, there are soldiers who fight for their homeland, and there are those who fight for a single person. For years, the war was just a distant memory. The world, wounded and suspicious, slowly began to rebuild itself. Cities rose from the rubble. Families tried to stitch together the pieces that remained, and survivors returned to their routines with the strange feeling that they had lived several lives. Within one, Anna was among these people. She survived the bombing of the village, was taken with her mother to a refugee camp, and, for long months, lived in constant displacement, passing through hospitals, makeshift stations, and temporary accommodation. Her health fluctuated, but her will to live, or at least to find Victor again, kept her going. She waited. Every day, I looked at the train tracks, at the newspapers, at the faces on the streets. Every time a soldier returned, I felt my heart leap, hoping to see him among them. But Victor never returned. And worse, no letter, no messages, no signal. For the first few months, he believed it was the fault of the interrupted mail. Afterwards, he was perhaps injured, unable to write. But over time, the absence became an unbearable pain. He began to imagine the worst. Still, he didn't cry in public. She kept the scarf he had given her always tied to her chest, as a symbol of a love that, despite everything, still breathed. The years passed. The war is behind us. Anna rebuilt part of her life. She returned to the village, took care of her mother until her last days, worked as a seamstress and, later, a teacher. She was admired for her delicacy and strength, but everyone noticed there was something in her eyes that never healed, a silent weight, an absence that not even time dared to touch. Nobody talked about Victor anymore. For most, he had died, like so many others. But for Anna, there was no body, there was no goodbye, just an inexplicable void. And that emptiness was what hurt the most. She never married, not for lack of suitors. There were several who admired her, but Anna smiled, thanked, and refused. Her heart, she said, had already made a choice a long time ago. Time then took its course. Decades later, that letter, the last one written by Victor before the final mission, was still kept. Wrapped in faded string, it rested among old belongings inside a trunk inherited by the family. It had been placed there by Pavel, the war companion who had received it, along with other souvenirs that had no specific destination. Over the years, the names became confused, the stories became confused, and the letter fell into oblivion. Until, by a quirk of fate, Alina, Anna's granddaughter, found the trunk. She had never heard of Victor. He knew that his grandmother was marked by the war, but he always believed that her silences were just common scars of the time. Until I opened that envelope. Alina, reading the letter, felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The handwriting was shaky but firm. The words cut deep. If this letter reached you, my beloved Anna, it is because fate decided that I would not return. I write with trembling hands, but with a whole heart, a heart that belongs to you from the first day and until the last breath. I fought for me, for us, and when I had to make my final choice, I made it with your name on my lips. It was a letter of farewell, of gratitude, of eternal love. It was the end of a story that never reached its conclusion. Alina cried when she finished reading. And more than that, he felt a deep urgency to give back to that story what was taken from him. The letter needed to be read by the woman for whom it was intended. But Anna was no longer alive. She had passed away a few years earlier, peacefully, with a serene smile on her face. She left without ever knowing that Victor never forgot her, without ever knowing he had written it, until the end, that he fought for her. The letter arrived late, but not useless. For Alina, it was like meeting her grandmother again. Finally, he understood the reason for the sad look, the guarded love, the eternal fidelity. He understood the weight of an untold story, a true love that, although it never came true, never died. Alina did what she could. He framed the letter, wrote Victor's name next to Anna's on a small wooden plaque, and placed it in the garden of his grandmother's old house, the same one where the two, one day, had promised each other the impossible, that they would love each other forever, no matter what, and somehow, they delivered. Time, they say, is the greatest healer of all. But there are wounds that it doesn't close, he just teaches how to carry them. For Anna, the years following the war were exactly that, a slow march towards a peace that never fully came. Life went on. She followed, but something inside her never bloomed. Again, after returning to the devastated village, Anna found only ruins of what she had once called home. His childhood home was in ruins, the school where he learned to write had been burned, and the streets, once full of life, now seemed to carry the silence of those who did not return. She spent weeks helping rebuild the city, sewing clothes, organizing supplies, caring for orphans. But what no one knew was that, at night, when the village fell asleep, she sat on the bench in the old square and waited. I was waiting for Victor. In the first few months, every sound of a horse, every distant engine made his heart race. Was it him? Was he finally coming home? But he didn't come back. And slowly, Anna began to accept what she didn't want to believe, that her great love had become a permanent absence. Still, she never talked about it. He carried his grief in silence, like a sacred secret. Neighbors said she was a strong, determined woman who had faced the horrors of war and started her life on her own. Some even thought that she had never really fallen in love. Little did they know that, inside the chest of that discreet woman, there was a heart that was still waiting for a voice, for a hug, for a letter that never arrived. Anna started teaching children. He was kind, patient, and had a special talent for teaching poetry. Her students loved her perhaps because, in teaching verse, she revealed fragments of her own soul. I used to repeat a phrase, some stories don't need a happy ending, they just need to be true. Never married, not out of bitterness or pride, but because I had made a choice. His heart belonged to someone who was lost in war, but who never lost himself in it. Friends encouraged her, introduced suitors, but she always smiled kindly and said, "My time to love is over," and it was too beautiful to be repeated. Still, his life was not empty. She built deep bonds with the children she taught, cared for her mother until the end of her life, and became a silent reference of strength and dignity. He planted flowers in the garden every year, especially Lilivictor's favorites. He said they were stubborn like him. They were born even in the harshest winters. But there was a room in the house that no one went into. A small room with a bookshelf, an antique armchair, and a wooden box stored at the top of the closet. It was there that Anna kept her memories, photographs, the scarf embroidered with his initials, the silver chain, and a diary where, from time to time, she wrote letters that she never sent. Letters to Victor. Darling, today I woke up with a memory of your touch. I don't know if it was a dream or a memory. I felt you calling me, just like old times. I still wait, not in the same way now. I wait in silence, as someone who knows that life is also made up of those who don't return. Years passed. Youth faded into grey hair and slower steps, but the sparkle in Anna's eyes remained. A sad glow, it's true, but full of tenderness. She lived until her final days surrounded by former students, neighbors, and later, by her granddaughter, Elena, daughter of a distant brother who she raised as her own. Elena, who always felt that her grandmother held a piece of her soul somewhere in the past, but never knew what. Anna left on a quiet spring afternoon, as if she had chosen the right season to say goodbye. She was sitting on the porch, with a book on her lap and a soft smile on her lips. When Elena found her, it was as if she was just dozing off. At the funeral, everyone spoke about his generosity, his wisdom, his enormous heart. But no one mentioned Victor's name. No one, except Elena, who still didn't know what was in the trunk, but had already intuited since always that her grandmother's love was a story that no one knew completely. And when, years later, he found the forgotten letter, everything made sense. Every gesture, every silence, every refusal of a new love. Anna had lived the life, yes, but it never healed, because certain pains don't go away. They just turn into tenderness. And that's how she lived, with longing in her eyes, love in her heart, and the quiet hope that, somewhere, one day, she would meet the one she never stopped waiting for. Elena grew up surrounded by affection, books, and silence. His grandmother, Anna, was a woman of few words, but of many gestures. There was special care in everything he did, from the way he folded the sheets to the way he served tea. Everything about her seemed loaded with meaning, as if she lived in constant communion with memories that only she knew. Since she was a child, Elena realized that there was an untold story behind her grandmother's eyes, a look that sometimes got lost in the horizon, even when they were just planting flowers in the garden. Over the years, he learned not to ask. He respected that sacred space in Anna's soul, even without understanding it. When Anna passed away, Elena was already an adult. The house was silent in a different way. It was no longer the silence of someone who keeps something inside themselves. It was the silence of someone who left, leaving behind a trail of soft and unfinished mysteries. For weeks, Elena organized her grandmother's belongings with the care of someone handling relics. Among photo albums, handmade embroidery, and old books, there was an attic where Anna rarely let anyone enter. It was a small place, almost forgotten, but there Elena felt a calling, as if that space held not just objects, but answers. That's where he found the chest, an old piece made of dark wood and oxidized iron. Inside were memories that seemed to have been held, not with time, but against it. There were dried flowers, notebooks, a silver chain with a small star, which she recognized from childhood, without ever knowing its origin. But what caught his attention most was an envelope held together by a faded blue ribbon. The handwriting, still firm, said, "To Anna, if one day you can still hear me." Elena felt a shiver run down her spine. With shaking hands, he untied the ribbon and opened the envelope. The paper, aged, preserved the fragility of time and the strength of someone who wrote with their soul. She read slowly, absorbing each word as if she were hearing her own voice from the past speak directly to her heart. "My Anna, if this letter reached you, it is because fate, although cruel, was fair. I write on what may be the last night of my life. The war took everything from me, except what matters most, the love I feel for you. You were my reason to resist, my most vivid memory, my silent hope. If we don't see each other again in this world, may the next one allow us to make up for lost time." When she finished reading, Elena was in tears. The letter, written by someone called Victor, a name he had never heard before, was so full of emotion, of farewell, of unconditional love, that it seemed impossible that his grandmother had kept it for so many years without ever talking about it. With a heavy heart, Alina looked for clues. He looked through Anna's diaries, the old notebooks, and began to find subtle traces, small notes, initials, drawings, poems signed with a V. The story was all there, hidden amid the seams of time. Anna had loved a man with all the intensity a heart could bear, a soldier, an absent present, a ghost that inhabited your nights and your dreams. And for some reason, the letter that could have changed everything never reached her until now. Alina felt as if she had been tasked with a mission. That letter wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the last voice of an interrupted love, an echo that had been waiting for decades for someone who could hear it. She typed the name Viktor Petrov into digital files, scoured war records, military diaries, lists of the missing. He found fragments, a worn photograph of a platoon, an incomplete document, an account from a surviving soldier, possibly Pavel, the friend, who promised to deliver the letter. Everything fit. Alina wrote the story, recorded everything. He gathered the documents, scanned the letter, made copies of his grandmother's notebooks. Then, she returned to the house and walked to the garden, the same one where Anna spent her afternoons, the same one where she herself had learned to plant. He buried a small time capsule there, with the letter, Victor's photograph, and a note from him. "Today, grandmother, you received the letter. Today, Victor finally reached you. May this love, however late, find rest." Later, Alina began sharing the story, first with friends, then with the world. The story of Anna and Victor, of love that withstood war, distance, silence, and even death, touched thousands of hearts. People from all over the world began writing, telling how the letter had reminded them that true love is not dependent on time or circumstance. That letter, lost for decades, had finally found its destination. And, with her too, hearts separated by history came together in an unexpected way, through memory. Because, sometimes, it's only when we open the forgotten trunks of the past that we understand that love never disappears, he just waits. Alina held the letter with reverent care, as if afraid that the simple act of turning the page would undo the miracle before her. She was sitting in her grandmother's old armchair, surrounded by the soft smell of old books and old wood, when she decided to reread the letter, aloud, not just to herself, but to Anna, wherever she was. Alina's voice trembled at the first words, but as I read, it was as if Victor's presence filled the room. Each sentence, written with pain and tenderness, crossed time and reached the present with absolute force. "My Anna, I write to you from a place where the sound of bombs mixes with the beating of my heart. I don't know if this will be my last letter, but I write it as if it were. Today, I was called to a mission from which I may not return, and for that reason, I need to leave you my last words, my last breath, in the form of paper." Alina closed her eyes for a moment. It was like hearing a whisper from an ancient time, as if Victor was sitting there, next to her. Each word carried the weight of farewell, but also the inextinguishable glow of a love that not even war could erase. "You were always my light on dark days, my north when everything seemed lost. I fought for you, I breathed for you. And now, if this really is my end, I want you to know, I was yours until the last moment." Elena's voice cracked. The tears flowed freely. But she continued, "If by some miracle you are reading this, perhaps it will be too late to find me. But it will never be too late to know that you were loved, not just by a soldier, but by a man who gave his all in every word, every memory, every dream he dreamed of you. Don't cry for me, Anna. Live, live for us. Plant lilies in the garden, smile at the sky, and if you ever feel the wind touch your skin, remember, it's me, still trying to reach you." The silence after the last sentence was absolute. Alina sat for several minutes, hugging the letter to her chest. She had never heard her grandmother speak so deeply about love, pain, or longing. But now she understood. Anna had said everything, just silently, a silence that now gained a voice. That night, Alina lit a candle and left it on the old porch table, along with the letter. He sat in front of it and spent hours, watching the flames dance, feeling as if he were in the company of two ghosts who had finally found each other again. Later, she decided that that reading couldn't just be between her, Victor, and Anna. He recorded the reading of the letter on video. No edits, no background music, just your voice, the soft candlelight, and the letter on the table. He shared the video with the following title: "The Last Letter, a love that survived the war but could never come true." She had no idea what would happen next. In just a few days, thousands of people started watching, commenting, and sharing. Many said they had never cried so much over a story. Others told of their own lost loves, of letters that never arrived, of words they never said. The video became a space for collective mourning, but also for celebrating what is most human: the ability to love, even in the face of loss. Reading the last letter didn't just reveal forgotten history, it reconnected people to what's most essential. Because, in a world accustomed to noise, rush, and discard, Victor had left something eternal. Words that asked for nothing, just delivered everything. And as the letter came to life on the screen of thousands of people in different places around the world, maybe, just maybe, two hearts, separated by decades and war, could finally rest. In Elena's heart, something changed forever. She understood that her role in history was not just to discover the past, but to honor it. Reading the letter was the beginning of a new mission: preserving forgotten loves, giving voice to silences, and reminding the world that there are feelings that resist everything, even to war, even in time. If that letter had arrived 30 years earlier, perhaps Anna's fate would have been different. Maybe she had finally understood that Victor never forgot her. Maybe he would have found some kind of peace while he was still alive. But fate, with its imperfect punctuality, preferred to deliver the truth too late. And yet, or perhaps because of that, the discovery of the letter was transformative. Anna had already left when Elena found Victor's last message, but the strongest reaction came from his absence. It was as if, suddenly, everything that had remained unexplained gained shape and meaning. Anna's silence, her refusal to love again, her eyes wandering like someone still waiting for someone, it all made sense now. Elena spent days reliving the letter, the records, her grandmother's notes. He started looking at old photos with new eyes. That image of Anna, so young and beautiful, sitting next to the stream with a book in her hands, now took on new weight. That was probably where she and Victor met. It was there that dreams were dreamed and undone by war. More than that, Anna's choices were now understood through another lens. The diary that Elena found contained sparse notes, like loose thoughts written with a mix of hope and resignation. There was no revolt, just a sad acceptance of absence. I don't know if Victor lives, but inside me, he's never left. I wait, without knowing what I hope for. I breathe, and in every breath there's a piece of him. That's not pain, exactly. It's something deeper. It's pure longing. Elena began sharing these words with close friends, and everyone who knew Anna was impressed. The woman who for so many years had been a rock of serenity carried, in secret, a love story worthy of the most epic romances, but real, lived with silent courage. Upon discovering the letter, Elena also sought out the last people who had known her grandmother closely. Among them was an old friend from my youth, Miss Zoya, now almost 90 years old. When Elena showed the letter, Zoya cried like she was 20 again. So he never forgot her, he said with a broken voice, and she never stopped loving him. My God, what war does not destroy? Time tries to bury, but love finds a way to come back. From then on, Elena decided to transform her grandmother's memory into a living tribute. He organized a small ceremony in the garden of the house where Anna had spent most of her life. It was spring, like the time Victor left. He invited friends, former students, neighbors. In the center of the garden, he placed an empty chair, symbolizing Anna, and, next to it, a small open wooden box with the letter on a white cloth. He read the letter out loud, in front of everyone. The silence that followed the reading was absolute. Some cried, others simply looked up at the sky, as if searching for some sign. It was impossible to get out of there without being touched, because, even though the love between Anna and Victor never materialized in the expected way, it became eternal, a type of eternity that is born when two souls meet, even if for a short time, and never let go, not even in the face of death. Later, Elena planted a white lily exactly where Anna's chair had been. Next to it, he placed a plaque with a phrase from Victor's own letter: "If there's anything after this, that's where I'll be waiting for you." Anna's reaction, even if posthumous, could be felt by everyone. It was as if that letter, finally read, had released something inside her, as if, on the other side of eternity, She had finally heard the words she had waited for so long. And maybe, just maybe, in that very moment, in a place where clocks no longer make sense, Victor smiled. Because, even after everything, your letter arrived, and she read it. There are stories that end with a kiss, others with a wedding, some with unexpected reunions at train stations or hugs at sunset. But there are stories that, although they never had a happy ending, continue to resonate in people's hearts, and perhaps these are the most powerful. The story of Anna and Victor is one of those, a love that started young, pure, light, and that, even crossed by war, absence and silence, never lost its essence. A love that did not have a reunion, that did not reach and they lived happily ever after, but that survived everything, including its own impossibility. It's strange to think that something can be eternal even without being complete, but this is the paradox of unfinished love. It remains suspended in time, untouched by the banalities of routine, immune to the disappointments of everyday life. There was no time for fights, for wear and tear, for distancing. What happened was intensity, true, and absence. And, curiously, this absence became a presence. Victor died believing that his last letter might never be read, and Anna lived believing that he had disappeared without saying goodbye. But the love between the two did not die with silence, nor did it fade with time. It stood there, invisible, like an underground root that remains alive, even though the tree has disappeared from the surface. This type of love is not measured by the number of days, but by the depth of feelings. Alina, upon discovering this story, understood something that many people spend their entire lives without realizing. There are loves that exist not to last a lifetime, but to shape who we are. Victor was the most present absence in Anna's life, and Anna was the presence that Victor carried until his last breath. Perhaps this explains why so many people were moved by reading the letter, because we all, at some level, carry an unfinished memory within us. A lost love, a farewell that had no words, a gesture that never happened, a response that never came. Anna and Victor's story reminds us that what is true never dies, it only changes form. Unfinished love is one that can no longer be lived in the present, but that continues to touch us in the now. It no longer offers promises of the future, but carries within it the beauty of what was real. It is a type of love that, precisely because it did not have an end, remains suspended, ethereal, almost sacred. And that kind of love teaches. It teaches that we should say what we feel while there is still time. What letters should be sent today, not tomorrow. What hugs must be given before the tracks take someone away. That silence can be crueler than any distance. And that there are words that need to be said, even if we fail to find the right moment. Victor said his words at the last moment. Anna never got the chance to respond. But life, or destiny, or chance, tried to bring these two loose ends together so that, even belatedly, this exchange could happen. Even if, through the voice of a granddaughter, even decades later, it's as if history itself has refused to let this love fall into oblivion, as if life, in its mysterious way, said, they deserve to be remembered. And so, the unfinished love turned into a legacy. It is no longer alive in bodies, but pulsates in words, in memories, in the emotion it awakens. It's in the lilies planted in the garden, in the framed letter on the fireplace, in the eyes of Alina, who now carries the burden and the gift of telling this story to the world. Anna and Victor's story is not just a war romance. It's a reminder that true love transcends logic. It does not need to be fully experienced to be real. Sometimes the most powerful of feelings is the one that never ends. Because, in the end, that's what love is. Giving your heart, even without guarantees. And some deliveries last until eternity. The letter was written in the middle of the war, with the trembling pen of a man who didn't know if he would see tomorrow. Stored for decades, forgotten at the bottom of a trunk, it waited. She waited for eyes that could read her from the heart, for hands that treated her with reverence, for someone who understood her urgency. When it was finally opened, it transformed everything. Victor's last letter wasn't just a goodbye. She was a link between different times, a bridge between generations, a silent testimony that true love doesn't disappear. It remains, even when the world around it falls apart. For Alina, this letter redefined the family's past. Before, your grandmother was a strong, kind, silent woman. Now, she was also a woman deeply in love, marked by a story that did not end, but became eternity. Victor stopped being just a distant memory and gained a name, face, voice, soul. It became a presence. The legacy of this letter did not stop there. The video in which Alina reads the letter to the world became a window into thousands of hearts that also carried unfinished loves. People started writing back. They told their stories. They shared their losses. The letter became a symbol of something bigger, an invitation to rescue forgotten feelings, to remember, to forgive, to say what needs to be said before time runs out. In several cities, ancient letter reading groups emerged. Schools started to include the story of Anna and Victor as part of projects about memory and affection. Young people were inspired to write love letters, real ones, by hand, with ink smudged with emotion. Because suddenly, people realized nothing replaces the strength of a word written from the heart. The house where Anna lived was turned into a small memorial, not a cold museum, but a living space where visitors sit in the garden, read letters, write their own, plant lilies. The bench where she used to wait for Victor now has a sign with the phrase, "He wrote every day." And one day, she read it. There, couples meet again. Children talk to their parents again. People write letters to themselves. The last letter, which was born from a goodbye, became a starting point for new beginnings. And the most beautiful of all, the letter caused Victor and Anna to finally become what they were always destined to be, immortal, not in the body, not in physical presence, but in the impact they made, in the story they left, in the love they lived, even if for a short time, even if from a distance, even if in silence. Because the true legacy of love is not in the time it lasts, but in the mark it leaves. Victor and Anna's love didn't have a classic ending. There was no reunion at the station, no old age shared under the same roof, but there was something much greater, a love that resisted war, oblivion, time, and that found a way to eternalize itself. And now, it lives inside each person who heard this story, who felt the lump in their throat, who held back crying, who remembered someone. This is not just the story of a soldier and his loved one, it's the story of all of us. Because, at some point in our lives, we have all been Victor, we've all been Anna, and we are all, in some way, still waiting for our letters to get where they need to go. If this story touched you in any way, if it reminded you of someone who marked your life, of a love that remains silent, or of words that still need to be said, then reciprocate. Share this message with the world. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and help keep stories that transform hearts alive. What Victor and Anna experienced was not just love, it was legacy. And by spreading this story, you become part of it. Because maybe someone, somewhere, needs to hear exactly that. That true love is not lost. It just waits for the right moment to be read.